let's jump into that, right into that, because and start the topic of AR gaming, which I don't know if you agree, but to me, AR gaming is a controversial topic because we, considering how much we can do in AR as far as the advancement of the technology, I haven't seen many successful AR games, for example. Right? We always hear when we mention AR, we always hear Pokemon Go was a success. Right? And many people, like 90% of people that I meet, when they are asked about tell me about a successful AR project, they always mention Pokemon Go. And that's not because they're ignorant, but I think to a certain extent it's because there weren't that many successful, AR games, AR experiences that went viral, that were widely adopted.
The biggest VR game of all time earned $60 million. Pokemon Go has earned $6 billion. So the biggest AR game of all time earned 100 times more than the biggest VR game of all time. Now, maybe you haven't played them personally. Maybe you're getting funded from Facebook or something. But there are a lot of successful AR games. Mm-hmm. In China and Japan, AR games have earned $250 million and $500 million. Here in the US, there's a Jurassic World game that earned $100 million.
It was successful from a start. Huge number of users from a start, actually. And to be exact, according to Statista, it's like 2021 was $9.5 billion market when it comes to AR mobile.
I think there's a certain amount of condescension about VR versus AR. And I think I understand why. Because in VR, it's immersive. Oh, I'm looking at 1 billion polygons. I'm immersed in a fantasy world. But the fact of the matter is, you're in your mom's basement with the lights turned off. I'm at a party. I'm at a wedding. I don't think that anybody really wants to wear VR goggles for 6 hours a day. I know Facebook wants us all to be little zombies trapped in a VR prison as our bodies waste away and we forget to eat. But I think most people don't want to get disconnected from the world like that. And there's something about VR that I think is actually very important. In VR, because it's dangerous to walk around. I mean, you can do it in an arcade with a safety system and a floor mat, but almost all VR is done sitting in a chair. Now, I can look up, but nobody really wants to play a game like this for 6 hours or even 30 minutes. Mostly I'm looking straight ahead. I can look around, I can look down and up, but most VR, I'm looking straight ahead. Well, you know what's also straight ahead? My computer monitor. VR is better than my computer monitor, but it's not a categorically different experience. It's basically the same as having a really big, nice monitor. More or less. But in augmented reality, and I run a company, so maybe I'm a little biased, but in augmented reality, you're walking around in the real world where you might meet a person, you might see a flower, you might go to the grocery store or a restaurant. You're in the real world. And I think that's why Pokemon Go was so successful, because you don't have to do it from your mom's basement in the dark, which, by the way, video game players will do. But people who do not regularly play video games, they don't want to be in a dark basement. So it was a game that could access the mainstream market. Now, people who work in VR tend to be a little condescending because augmented reality games work on a small device. This device doesn't have 1 billion polygons. It's not immersive, John. VR is immersive. AR is terrible. But the thing is that the game doesn't really take place on the phone. The game is enabled by the phone, but it takes place in the real world. which, by the way, is bigger than VR. And there's a real difference between the way that you move in these games. In VR, you move with the keyboard, or maybe you've got joysticks and you're moving with the device in your hands. But in augmented reality, you move by actually walking around. If you want to see something in AR, you literally are looking around and you're seeing it on your phone. So the way that you move is more visceral. It's difficult to explain it verbally, but there's something very exciting and also immersive about physically walking so that your avatar and your viewpoint can move in the game. If you think about someone who's depressed, they're sitting on a sofa. I'm depressed. I've been depressed in my life, of course. When you're sitting on your sofa and you're feeling depressed, you don't want to move because your heart rate is down, your whole body is kind of like shut down, and that affects your mood. When you're walking, even if you're playing a game, maybe not trying to get exercise, but you're walking around, it elevates your heart rate. It lifts your mood. It literally makes you happy to walk around. And also being outdoors in the sunlight, as modern chimpanzees, modern monkeys or apes, that's how we're built. We're built to be part of the real world. We're not really built by evolution. We're like, I'm at a party. I'm at a wedding. I want to give all my time and money to Facebook. Instead, I'm engaging with the real world, and I think that's good for mental health. It's good for social health. I'm sure that you've heard that the world has a crisis of loneliness. There are a lot of lonely people in the world. Of course, because of COVID, we have to be separate. But even before COVID, I think social media is, because of social media, people spend a lot of time on the internet instead of in the real world with real friends. Now, there's nothing really wrong with having social media friends, but it isn't the same. It doesn't feel as wholesome, as fulfilling as having real friends in the real world. So I think people are feeling lonely these days. There's a crisis of loneliness, partly because we're investing a lot of time in social media, which is not, it doesn't feel as good as investing our time in the real world. Well, in augmented reality, you're walking around in the real world. That's a more wholesome experience. You know, people don't want to spend 6 hours in VR, but if you're doing errands, you're going shopping, you're commuting to work, and you happen to have the game going, I think people could do that. If you're meeting a real world friend, going for a walk, you could do that. There's nothing draining about that. Like wearing a VR headset, it drains you. Playing AR, it gives you energy.
I do have experience in VR. I own a Quest 2 headset. Other than that, I'm more of a console gamer. But I agree with most of your points about VR, but with some of them, not really.
That's because you're wrong.
What would that be, Marcin?
Movement. First of all, movement. Okay, one thing, yes, I agree. The fact that, for example, that you experience motion sickness in VR is because you're not moving in reality, right? So let's say your character in the game is spinning around, but you're not feeling, your brain's not feeling the physical sensation of spinning around. There's no centrifugal force that actually, makes you, would make you dizzy in the real world. So when you move around in VR just using your joystick and you're not actually moving around, then you feel motion sickness. But when I play, let's say, first-person perspective shooters in VR, if I actually move around, at least, the rotation of the character, if I do it by just actually moving in space, then I don't feel motion sickness. And I can get pretty sweaty playing some of the games. So there's that. So I don't feel, depressed sitting in a chair. And this spider plant can attest to that, because this plant has actually flew through most of my living room when I once bounced it with my controller playing something like a similar game to Beat Saber on VR. So there's a lot of movement, but I do understand when you're saying that VR I mean, this immersion comes at the cost of complete detachment from everything, basically, right? So, and for others as well. I mean, there are users you interact with, but it's not the same as really connecting to people. And also to me, I would say the main difference, at least the one that's most important for me, is how you consume VR and how you consume AR. And you've already mentioned that. For VR, you got to stay within the headset for, consecutive hours, let's say. That's what Facebook wants. And when I play console, let's say we join up with friends and we set aside 2 hours and we play throughout those 2 hours, right? But with AR and used with a handheld device, this becomes something that you can use throughout the day, right? So it can be more attractive to more casual gamers or non-gamers.
It can be a
Because
pass-by when we are waiting for the bus stop or whatsoever. So it can be very short, effortless, actually.
And there's no special hardware to buy. I don't have to buy the VR goggles. I just have a smartphone, which I already own.
And what I do like about AR potential, I'm not sure if it's going to go this way, but I like the fact that it may actually educate you and drive you towards cool places around in your neighborhood or in a place you are visiting. Because with this whole scanning, you can actually, learn like, what is it? Yes, you see a cool sculpture or mural and you can check it out. Like, you can do it with AR experience on your smartphone, or maybe there's a cool cafe, yes, on the corner, and okay, it's a cool place to visit. Like, you don't miss it, yes. So it's like something extra to the whole gaming experience as well. But I'm not sure. Like, do you think that game creators will go this way with the spots, like real spots?
Well, we're already seeing that all the games that are cloning Pokemon Go have a model where they push you around in the real world and they give you an incentive to explore and to see things in the real world. So I think that's already happening.
Would that be a business model? Let's say I'm Starbucks and I want to speak to the guys from Pokemon Go. Look, I want to have a point of interest in the game that leads to, my coffee places around New York, and I'm going to pay for that, right? So that people actually visit. They're, pressed by the game to visit and then interact with each other within the coffee place. So would that be a business model for the AR games?
It certainly is, and Pokemon Go already has that business model. You can pay money to have Pokemon spawn outside of your business and hope that draws players. It's a rather simplistic model, to be frank, and we have something that we think is cooler and more advanced that we're working on, but it's a good model. Pokemon Go made partnerships with Starbucks, McDonald's, and Sprint. They made at least $500 million, charging half an American dollar for each time a player visited. And they can't even prove that the player went into the store and bought something. That's just for the player to show up on the sidewalk in front of the store. That's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of money to be made in games like this. I think our company is also working on a way of letting players socialize through the game. There are a lot of people that are lonely, and it's partly because they're a little afraid to socialize. I don't know if I want to go to this party. I feel some anxiety, some social anxiety. I don't know how to meet people. But a dumb little game, it can give you a public place to meet, a safe public outdoor place. Two adults can meet, they play a little game together, and the game helps to bond them. It's like going to the zoo together or going to an escape room together, or a team building exercise for a company. A little shared challenge bonds strangers into friends. And there's got to be money in that because people are lonely. Making friends online is already valuable. Making real world friends, that's got to be super valuable. And I want that money.
Right. So you've already proven that it makes sense to build a successful AR game, right? I mean, from a financial standpoint. I can't argue with the statistics about how large the market is. So yes, you did. I do stand corrected on most of my points. And then, but still, there were some projects that were unsuccessful, even though they were part of they were using a very popular franchise, right? So Niantic did Harry Potter, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it failed as a product.
That's very interesting, I think, to me as well, and to our listeners. Like, what could be the reason behind this failure?
The company Niantic, which makes Pokemon Go, had an engine that was mostly about collecting things. And they put that into the Harry Potter world. But if I'm playing a Harry Potter game, I'm fantasizing about being a wizard. Well, I don't want to just run around collecting things. It was the wrong technology for that movie and book franchise. And I know the secret. The secret. Are you ready for this? The secret is that Niantic is not really a games company. They're really a mapping company. They were created from Google Maps. They like maps. They don't even really want to build games. They want to build a technology, some tools, and they want others to build games. Well, guess what? If your game is not about collecting, you kind of can't do that.
Right. So you're saying that certain plot lines better translate to AR than others, right? So
I'm not
Pokemon...
saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying that Niantic is doing it wrong because they're not a games company. But AR is not doomed. There is a better way of doing it, and my company Monsarrat is doing it that way. We have 3 patented technologies that allow us to tell better stories in our game. It isn't just like collecting things. In the Monsarrat games, there's a mystery. You have you're meeting characters and using diplomacy to stop a war, or you're a detective trying to solve a murder mystery, or if it was a Harry Potter game, which it's not, you would be learning wizard spells and having battles and trying to figure out where the bad guys are and solving their evil plot and then stopping them. So that's how our games work.
So advanced interaction, right?
Right. In Pokemon Go, you have these little pinpoints of content all over the map. Little points of content. Each point of content is a little 60-second adventure where you flick the ball and you try to capture the Pokemon. Or you have a gym where you have Pokemon battles. But the story-based content in Pokemon Go is basically little 60-second adventures of collecting stuff. And each of these pinpoints on the map have no relationship to each other. So you can't use them as bricks to build a story. In the Monsarrat game, on the map, we create a game zone. The game zone is a polygon, and inside the polygon are little AR creatures or items. There's content inside the game zone. But all the content inside the game zone is related to one story. For example, in a murder mystery, you have the victim, you have the clues, you have the witnesses, you have the suspects, and that would all be contained in a small park about the size of a football field. Because all the items relate to a single story, I can have a role-playing game. And by the way, if you can tell good stories in your game, you can keep players playing for longer. You can make more money. That's why people play games, to get caught up in the stories.
I share your opinion that you might be right about the failure of Harry Potter. And I think that they've actually learned their lesson, because they've just launched Peridots, yes, where you actually breed cute.
Is that really a game, though? Peridot is a hyper-casual game where you do almost nothing. There's no grand story.
Those animals, yes.
It's not like Star Wars where you fly to different planets and you're investigating the mystery of the Jedi. you're growing creatures. That's not really a story, is it?
And it's been
No,
there,
no.
yes, for ages. Like it wasn't an AR game, but the whole concept was there. Yes, so
It's like an AR Tamagotchi, right?
yeah,
But
AR
what Johhny is
Tamagotchi.
That's right.
yeah. But what John is saying is that, well, basically, one of the things that you said is that storytelling is a major thing for AR, and that's why my question is: so AR is a medium. What are the rules? Because let's say someone is a founder that wants to build an AR experience or a game. What are the rules of the medium, right? So, what do you need to think about to make the game successful?
Well, if I think about a traditional role-playing game, you are going on a quest. Like in Lord of the Rings, they begin with the hobbits, they walk to the volcano, and they put the ring in the volcano. Spoiler alert. So that's an example of a quest. Well, in augmented reality, I want to start with the hobbits, then I walk and I walk and I walk, and then I get to the volcano, and then I drop in the ring, and that's a story. Of course, it can be a more fun story if I have some challenges, some encounters. As I'm walking around the fantasy world, I have experiences, I meet creatures, and we all know this because we've all played MMO games or RPG games. What we're doing in augmented reality, my company, Monsarrat, is we're taking an MMO or RPG type of game and we're laying it out on a map. And that's basically how our game works. So to do that, you ask me, what are the rules for how developers can do this? One of the rules is simply to have a map. We call it a game zone, but it could be just a map where the content is related to each other in a single story. And we learned from a game called The Witcher Monster Slayer that the game items cannot be too far apart. I don't want to walk 20 minutes. It's too much walking. I want all the game elements to be close together. Now, if the game elements are all close together, it makes you wonder, where are these game elements going to be placed? Well, I can place them in a park. But what happens if the park looks like this, or the park looks like this, or the park has like a funny shape to it? So parks can have different shapes and sizes. At our company, we have a patented technology which works like a web browser. As you know, a website can be stretched, but it still works because of the constraints in the HTML and the CSS. Basically, websites are built so they can fit different size browser windows.
So responsive game zones.
Yeah, so a responsive game zone, I think that's one thing. Another thing is that in a role-playing game, I'll often encounter a physical challenge. Let's say, for example, that I want to go into a castle, but the castle drawbridge is up, there's a moat, there are guards, and they're stopping me from going into the castle. Or maybe I go to a cave. I want to go into the cave, but there's a dragon who's guarding the cave. But imagine that I'm in the park. I'm in the park with my phone. There's a dragon guarding the cave. Well, I'm a real person. If I want to just walk into the cave, I can walk through the dragon. I can't stop the players from just walking anywhere they want to go. The player could theoretically just walk into the cave, walk into the castle. And unless the player's wearing a shock collar, I can't really stop the players from going where they want to go in the real world. Well, there are a couple of smart ways around this. Our company also has a patent on this. We call it virtual obstacles. So imagine that there is a wall in the game, and I want to walk through the wall. The player can physically go anywhere, but the game can still control the virtual objects. I'm controlling the virtual world. So if the player walks through the wall, I move the entire world backwards. The player tries to move forwards, I move the world backwards. The player moves forwards, I move the world backwards. So as long as I adjust the world, I can make it so the player never gets to walk through that wall. I'm trying to walk through the wall, but I can't. Oh. Of course, there are some challenges. What if the player tries to walk through the wall and then there's a building or a highway or a cliff? There has to be some limit to how far I can push the game world. And that's why it's a patented technology. But since you asked, those are a couple of the challenges that we've faced building a game like this.
So Nomtek is well, at heart, we're engineers. So we're often tasked with very, engineer-like problems. And so whenever we discuss possible AR implementation for customers, oftentimes they wish for us to, sort of push the envelope on what's possible. And I was wondering, how important is that? For example, for the game graphics to be at an amazing fidelity level, and for the app to use some very sophisticated algorithms, like for hand tracking in different lighting conditions and so on. So really, where you have to tackle so many not practical problems, but just requests for using the top of the line technology to build that experience, where they believe the value of the experience lies in how sophisticated it is from the technical standpoint and the graphical standpoint. How important? Sorry, that's a very broad question, but how important for you it is for that that technical and graphical mastery of as far as the AR as a medium goes?
It can be very important. Certainly in Pokemon Go, the augmented reality is not very important to the game. In fact, more than half of all players turn off the augmented reality feature to play Pokemon Go because you don't really need it. But in our game, if you're going to have players trying to walk through walls and players fighting dragons and players trying to solve a mystery by walking around and meeting characters, you need the augmented reality to actually work. And of course, there are a lot of challenges. Many augmented reality algorithms have to do with discovering lines in the real world. If I have a sidewalk, the sidewalk has lines on it, straight lines. Buildings have straight lines on them. But if I'm in the park and I see grass, well, guess what? The grass all looks similar to the other grass. It's actually a bigger challenge for it's a bigger challenge to make augmented reality look stable and correct in the real world. But if I may, I think that I would take your question and kind of flip it over. It's not about how challenging is the augmented reality. I think it's about how easy it can be. And I would encourage a lot of people, maybe who are looking at this, if you're considering augmented reality, we're like, oh my God, AR, it seems so challenging. It's not anymore. Because of recent advances, AR can be applied very easily to a lot of simple situations. For example, in my game, maybe you're trying to be a detective solving a murder mystery. All I really need is to see the witness, see the clues, talk to the suspects. I don't need a huge amount of augmented reality. I make the analogy. Sometimes I read a book with no pictures. But it's taking place in my mind, right? As I'm reading the book, I'm thinking about what's happening in the story. And in a similar way, if I have a tiny phone, the phone can't show much because it's just tiny. Maybe there's some bright sunlight, so I can barely see the phone. Maybe the augmented reality, it works pretty well, but it's not perfect. It's okay, man, because it's taking place in my mind's eye. Now, I know that there's a little bit of condescension that comes from the world of virtual reality. It's like, oh, in virtual reality, we have 1 billion polygons. Okay, man, I get it. 1 billion polygons, great. But in augmented reality, the game takes place in the real world. I don't play the game like this as I walk around. I play it like this. And I can see the real world around me. Even though I'm enjoying the game, I don't forget that I'm in the real world. If I forgot, I might walk out into a hole. I might trip over something. I'm not going to forget that I'm in the real world. And I think it's actually a mistake for our competitor to focus so much on augmented reality. I love when competitors make big mistakes because
You can learn from them.
oh yeah, because Niantic, which makes Pokemon Go, is not really a games company. They're working on maps. They're working on augmented reality. But those are basic commodity technologies. And this puts them in direct competition with tech giants. I don't want to compete with tech giants. I don't want to build the next augmented reality technology. I want Facebook and Snap and Microsoft and Google and Apple to build the next augmented reality. And then I want to build game technology that relies on that. Having better augmented reality is like having better eye candy. There's nothing wrong with having good computer graphics in your game, but improving the computer graphics, there is a point of diminishing returns where improving the graphics more does not really enhance the game experience more. So what's important to me is not just computer graphics, but player interactivity, storytelling, monetization, player retention. Increasing the computer graphics or increasing the augmented reality, it doesn't really help with player interactivity. It doesn't really help with storytelling. And I think it's a mistake to focus too much on that.
John, one additional question to what you said, with this storytelling, is there any other AR gaming experience currently that, focuses on this storytelling? Or is it potentially something new?
Well, of course, we hope it's new. It's my company, so I hope it's new. And we have some patented technologies. Those patents prevent competitors from doing exactly what we're doing. But there was a game based in Poland called The Witcher Monster Slayer. It wasn't a commercial success, but it had a very smart idea about having a quest. I begin at one point on the map, and I get a quest, which is to fight the dragon and get the golden egg. Then I walk to a different point on the map, I fight the dragon, I get the golden egg, and then I bring the golden egg back to the wizard. And that's an example of a role-playing game, an example of a quest. Unfortunately, the way that they implemented it, there's too much walking. Players didn't want to walk that far. And also, they did it by individual points on a map rather than a game zone, which is how Monsarrat, my company, does it. In a game zone, I don't just walk from one point to another. I have an entire two-dimensional region that I can wander and explore, which is how role-playing games really work. If I'm in an MMO game, I can walk anywhere I want to, pretty much. So we think that that's a better model, and we think it's also a unique model. Hopefully, we can make it a big success.
So I don't know if you're aware of that, but you've just really hyped up your project to well, at least for me, to a very high degree. And I'm like, no, my question is, and it's even outside of our conversation, is what's the timeline? When should we be waiting for like the first release of your game? Because hearing what you said, I just plain simply, I want to try it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have this game done as soon as we can, but it's going to be at least a year. So hang on. We just raised some money. We have got a working mini game right now that we're showing privately to investors. So anyone who's an investor who wants to see this, I guess they can see it. Everyone else can't see it yet. I'm sorry. It's private. But
Martin is a gamer. I'm a non-gamer. Am I a target as well? Am I your target as well, Johhny?
Actually, yes. I think in the same way that Pokemon Go attracted non-gamers, we also hope to attract people. They don't care about the rules. They don't want to advance in the game. They just want to see some cool stuff and solve a murder mystery, maybe get matched with a stranger who becomes a real friend. So there's a lot in our game that doesn't require you to be a gamer to enjoy it.
I don't know about you, Kasia, but I really don't have, more questions for today. And I'm sort of leaning towards perhaps thinking about a brilliant summary of our conversation, which is not, I don't have one right now. Yeah, I don't have one right now, but I know I heard this quote from Elon Musk yesterday. So he was talking about space travel, but I would say he was meaning that it relates to technology on its own. So he said that in the 60s the US has put a man on the moon, right? And then later on they had space shuttles that only reached lower orbit. And then afterwards there was no space travel at all, right? So he was saying that technology as a phenomenon, it doesn't have this like inherent quality that it's self-propelled towards progress and sophistication. If you don't have like a bunch of visionaries that orchestrate an effort to actually, move that technology somewhere, use it for something, then it basically the technology gets degraded. So a civilization can even, forget how they did something. Like the Romans forget how they built the aqueducts at some point. Right. So my summary here is that what I loved about this conversation is I believe Johhny might be one of those visionaries that can keep AR as a technology, progressing. I guess towards sophistication as well, but more so towards how towards these more human needs, right? So if Johhny is coming from a standpoint where he's all about connecting people, letting them interact with the real world, and he wants to harness AR to do that, I think that's a very sort of commendable motivation for using AR. And I'm really hopeful that people like Johhny exist and they can bring use to AR, which has been around for a while, but you can remember in the beginning of the conversation, I wasn't convinced that AR is something that has already proven to be successful. But knowing that you're, onto something here, because I really feel that, knowing that, I feel, AR might be in a better place a year from now when your project is out. So thank you for that.
Last thing for me, I'll be a copycat here because actually I'll call you from now on a loneliness fighter. And that stays with me. And I hope you'll get a t-shirt with this tag one day, actually. And I hope also your game going to be a success.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Do we have time for a couple of extra comments?
Please go ahead, yeah.
When we were children, we used to play creative games like hide and go seek, capture the flag, Easter egg hunt. But as adults, if you want to play a game outdoors, it's always sports. It feels like sports is the only type of game that adults are allowed to play outdoors. Well, some people, like fat people like me, they don't want to play sports outdoors. Maybe they just don't have a culture of playing sports. They don't have a sports fantasy. Maybe they just weren't raised to watch sports. Or maybe sports don't feel creative enough or intellectual enough. Those kinds of people, they could play capture the flag, but they don't do that as adults. Well, we can use a game like the Monsarrat game or augmented reality games in general to reach adults who don't enjoy sports, but give them something that's creative to do outdoors. Get people who are in their mom's basement with the lights turned off, playing the game all day like this. Get them outdoors, walking around, because it's a type of outdoor game that is more attractive to people who don't play sports. Additionally, human beings have played games outdoors since the beginning of time, of course. But these type of outdoor games have never been computer administrated before. Even Pokemon Go, it's not player interactive. I mean, there's a little bit of interactivity with the gyms. It's turn-based gameplay. But real player interactivity hasn't been done that much in outdoor walking games. It's not just a new game, it's a new category of game. When you think of categories of game, you think about PC games, console games, arcade games, maybe a location-based game in a theme park. You've got mobile games, VR games, and of course AR that you play in your living room at home. But then AR walking games, it should be a whole new category of gaming, one that we're really just at the beginning of. March, and you made a comment that AR is an established technology. I don't think it really is. Virtual reality has been around 25, 30 years. But augmented reality, as I was mentioning, players of Pokemon Go, they mostly turned off the augmented reality feature. So even in 2016, when Pokemon Go came out, most people didn't really use the augmented reality. It's really only been in the last 2 or 3 years that augmented reality is good enough to do things that are sophisticated. So augmented reality, even though its best game earned 100 times more than VR, is still a new technology. We've been really delighted to work with Nomtek as our consulting expert, helping us boost our AR to the next level. We now have a little mini game that we're showing to investors, and it looks great.
Thank you so much, Johhny, for the ability to pick your brain on metaverse, on AR, on gaming. I think it will be a really inspiring podcast series.